goes, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots and in the great strength of their horsemen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord." So it's almost this idea that the Lord's strength doesn't come from what he's created. The Lord's strength is in himself as well, and we should rely on the Lord rather than, all these other things. He is our strength, he's our armor, he's our shield. Also, I think wasn't it Absalom that was riding on a mule, and he got his hair caught in a tree and met his demise, I think, while he was riding on a mule, but that's another story, I guess.
Where's it going? It's just going all around. It's like the hot potato over there.
My sister Bella had a question. Did Jesus' blood drip down a crack in the stone and onto the Ark of Angels, and was it in the cave? Did Jesus' blood drip down a crack in the stone and onto the Ark of Angels in a cave?
Well, why are you asking this question? I love it. Let me tell you that I love the question, but why are you asking this? Oh, you saw it on TikTok? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so here's the question is, when Jesus was crucified, there's a theory that when Jesus was crucified, after he dies, the earthquake happens, the veil in the temple is torn, many other things happen, but there's a theory that the ground beneath the cross would have split open, through which blood would have flowed down through the crack into an underground cavern where the Ark of the Covenant was being hidden, so that Jesus' blood sprinkles on the mercy seat, as it's called, the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, because in the Old Testament system, that is what they would do to make atonement for the sins, that the blood of the sacrificial lamb would be taken into the Holy of Holies, and then it would be sprinkled on top of the Ark of the Covenant to make atonement for the sins of the people. So there is a theory that was put out there by someone that Jesus' blood actually ends up on the mercy seat to fulfill the whole Old Testament law as it was originally written. You can't make any definite claims about it. The Ark of the Covenant disappeared. Nobody knows exactly where it is. There are theories, and one of the theories, if you ever go to Israel, we took a tour, and you get to go down into the underground level beneath the Temple Mount, where the temple used to be, and it is somewhere in that vicinity. There's a couple different locations where they think Jesus was crucified. First of all, you would have to identify that place to see if that was even a real possibility. And I'm not familiar with the particulars of I saw one video where they tried to explain it, but the ark would have had to have presumably been moved after that. But you can't say with any certainty if that actually happened. I like it. I like the theory. I think it's cool. I'm one of the guys who, I hear that kind of stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Jesus' blood ended up on the mercy seat. I love it, but you can't say. It would be a miracle for all of the blood to drip down through. I mean, the crack would have to be huge, and it's probably not, but I like it anyway. Lori had asked about in the heavenly realm, and I think that would be an easier application, that it took place in heaven, in the spiritual realm, but in the material, it's hard to say. Can't know for sure. but I do like the idea. Whoever said that on TikTok, you should follow that channel. Sounds like a fun channel to follow. Give me more of that.
So I have my own question.
Okay.
So for our youth group, we've been talking about the topic of worship for a few weeks. So I was wondering, how can the church encourage spiritual growth through their worship life?
How can the church encourage spiritual growth through their worship life? Well, I can tell you how our church tries to encourage spiritual growth through worship. And that is just to create a space of, like, with a sense of freedom. And that's what we have been for the past month or so, really trying to put in front of our people, that you just need to have freedom in your worship. Worship is, it's an offering that we give back to God, where we basically are, thanking Him. Sometimes even, if you look at the Psalms, which was Israel's worship book, their playlist, if you will, it's filled with songs of praise, songs of adoration. There's songs of lament, something that I feel like we really don't do enough in church, where they just have sad songs, like, my heart is broken and I'm in despair, God, and I feel so sad. And sometimes they just ends just like that. And it's just the outpouring of, Charles Spurgeon called the Psalms the anatomy of all parts of the human soul, that it's like an anatomy book of the soul. And I think that one of the ways that we grow in maturity is just removing any of the barriers, and particularly in worship. If we can just don't worry about the people who are around you. There's something beautiful that happens in a corporate setting. When you are worshiping with others, you're being encouraged and inspired by the voices of others, even by the excitement of others. But then sometimes it has this kind of effect where it does the opposite, and it kind of like stifles us a little bit, because you're like, what's somebody going to think if I raise my hands, or if I sing off key, or if I whatever? And I think that if we have freedom, if we feel a sense of freedom, then it allows the Spirit freedom to move in and through us. And really, I would say, to some degree, the time in my life that I spend in worship and the time in my life that I spend in the study of God's Word have been equally as transformative in my life. So I think it really just comes down to fully surrendering, making sure that we're creating an atmosphere where people can fully surrender. And then whatever happens, happens. And if they start rolling around on the floor, speaking in tongues, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, if that happens. But leave open the possibility.
I hate to do this to you. Come back to the Ark of the Covenant thing, because I'm kind of confused a little bit. Hopefully you can help me understand this. The Babylonian Empire came in and captured Jerusalem. And as I recall, they took all the artifacts and all the things that were in the temple to Babylon with them. One of the issues that I think it was Cyrus or one of them was using them for a party, some of the articles from the temple for a party. And then you had the Mene Tekel, whatever that phrase is. I thought that the Ark of the Covenant, if it was taken to Babylon, came back to Jerusalem with the return of the nation of Israel. Therefore, the question is, if it was hidden and didn't go to Babylon, what were they sprinkling the Passover lamb blood on when the high priest went in to offer? Can you clarify that for me? What exactly was going on?
No, because nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Okay.
And this is the thing. Everybody has theories, but like what seems most plausible to me is that when they were about to be conquered by Babylon, That was not a quick thing that happened overnight. That in the meantime, they hid the ark somewhere. It had been stolen by the Philistines a time before that and had fallen into the hands of someone else. So it would make sense that they would have hid it underground somewhere. You have Hezekiah's tunnel, which is still there also in Israel. A couple different places they could have stashed it away maybe. But yes, as far as, we don't, nobody knows. So I don't know. But I was never under the impression that it went to Babylon during the exile. It's just been lost forever. If you believe one of the greatest works of history that's right, Indiana Jones, thank you. The Nazis got it. The Nazis got it. I love that. Dave knew exactly where I was going with that one. Yes. And the Holy Grail, for that matter. What's that?
Anybody that touches it dies.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. You can carry it whatever by the poles or even on a cart without dying, as happened. But yes.
Would there be a need to find it? As a Christian, as we.
Can you just get the mic?
As Christians, would we need to find it?
No.
Right.
Yeah, so the whole temple system is essentially not needed anymore, right? Jesus, the word for the Ark of the Covenant is hilasterion. That's what it gets translated into from Hebrew into Greek, which is the same word that gets used of Jesus. He is the hilasterion, the hilasmos. He became the mercy seat himself. So that all of the Old Testament law pointing to Jesus. So in Jesus is the fulfillment of all of those things, and that was the great symbolic picture of the veil tearing there in the temple, that this system is fulfilled and not needed anymore. So
Isn't there something in the New Testament that says Christ presented himself in heaven with the blood or something to that effect in the New Testament?
in Hebrews chapter 6, he offered himself by the Spirit as a atoning sacrifice to the Father. That's the only one that's coming to my mind right now. I'm sure there's more somewhere, but.
I have a two-part question.
Oh,
I haven't studied this enough, but who is the angel of the Lord?
the angel of the Lord is almost certainly a pre-incarnate Jesus. It is some version or form of God every time the angel of the Lord shows up. Every single time. There is very good reason to believe that it is actually God. It is as the angel just is a word for messenger in Greek. Angelos is messenger. It's malak in Hebrew, the word for angel, and the word means messenger. So it is the messenger of the Lord. But when the angel of the Lord shows up, like particularly if you read the story of Gideon, Gideon falls on his face before the angel of the Lord, and essentially you have this prostrated, almost this worship that's going on. And the angel does not say, don't do that, as most angels do. And you have this a number of times with the angel of the Lord where there are a couple times when it is expressly God. And then there are some times when it's a little more ambiguous, but it's almost certainly in every instance you see angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, it's God. Now the question is, if we're talking Trinitarianly, what person of the Trinity? I land very solidly on any Old Testament appearance of God in the physical is what's called a Christophany, an appearance of Jesus, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. So you see this with Abraham, we just briefly talked about it on Sunday in chapter 18 when he comes to eat with whatever. It says the Lord appeared to him with these two others, these two angels, and it's almost certainly Jesus. God who walked in the garden with Adam and Eve, almost certainly Jesus.
What about, that's my part too, and I could have cracked my Bible while I was sitting here, but I thought I'd like to know what you say. What about the angel that came to Mary?
Well, that one is Gabriel, so that one's named specifically. So that one.
Why in different places, you know, where?
Well, if
a
it
lot
is
of people think that
Jesus,
that's Gabriel
if
too
the angel
in
of the
Old
Lord is
Testament.
Jesus, then it would make a little more sense if he sent someone else instead of Jesus coming and being like, I'm about to be in your womb
True.
to Mary.
Sure,
I
but
mean,
why do people think that the angel of the Lord from the Old Testament is Gabriel? I've heard that a lot.
because he's the most prominent. You only have two angels named in the Bible, Gabriel, whose primary job is always the messenger, and then Michael, whose primary job is always slaying demons and such. So you have the warrior angel and the messenger angel that are named. And if you don't look into the idea of the angel of the Lord, and you just take it as it says angel from God, then it's an angel bringing a message. This angel eventually gets the name Gabriel later on in the Bible, so it's probably Gabriel, but I would disagree with that. Thank you. Jamora.
I have two questions, one from the youth and one from me. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, the one from the
You're a
youth.
messenger, an angel.
Okay, thank you. The first one from the youth is, what's the meaning of life?
What's the meaning of life? I mean, 10 seconds, thank you. Nice, easy one. I mean, it's God created us. You would, right? We, as Christians, we have to go with the answer to that question coming from the perspective of God. He created us for fellowship with him. So the meaning of our existence is to love God and enjoy him forever. That's what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to come into fellowship with God, submit ourselves and surrender ourselves to him, understand that we owe a debt we can never repay, and offer our lives to God as living sacrifices.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
the meaning. You cannot find the meaning of this life within yourself or in this earth. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite quotes of his, he says, "If I find in myself a desire that cannot be fulfilled in this world, then I must conclude that I was made for someplace else." And that is, I think, what human experience is, that we all just have these, you chase whatever desire it is that you have, money, fame, pleasure, anything, and the story of every person who's ever done that is it leaves them empty in the end. So there must be something beyond this life that we're created for, and that's the meaning of life. As best as I can do.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for myself. And as you know, my mom's very prosperity gospel and stuff. So, like, I have a question related to that. So I said, I'm asking, why do some people receive more blessings than others or seem, like, more connected to God than others? Like, they'll, like, I don't know, it's, like, almost like they can predict the future. Like, oh, you'll have this, this, and this because you're close to God or whatever. Or if you're poor or something like that, that means that you're doing something wrong spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's no real easy answer to that question. Some people receiving more blessing than others, it just counts, it just matters how you count blessing. Like, what is a blessing? What things make a person blessed? And if you're talking in the material, I've been blessed materially. Many times in my life, I continue to be blessed. Angela and I are constantly humbled by the material blessings that we have received in our lives. I have not chased after wealth in my life, and I consider myself to be wealthy. I'm not by the world's standard, but I have seldom ever needed or wanted anything. I've never been poor or wondering where my next meal is going to come from or anything like that. I've had all of my needs supplied, and there is a certain amount of blessing that comes in that, but you really kind of get a picture of it anytime you go overseas to a third world country and you see these people who have none of those things and they are still so content. Their hearts are so full. They're so happy. And then you look at these people and you're like, man, we were just in Africa last summer, and it's like kids were, playing games with trash, literally trash, and they were happy. They were having a wonderful time, and you're just sitting there looking at them like, man, I know kids in America that have, my boys have a room full of toys, and so many times are not content with all of the things that they have. So it depends on, I'm saying that it just depends on how you measure blessing. I think true blessing comes in, again, relationship with God and in contentment. So you can be blessed. The word blessed actually has to do with your circumstances. Specifically, it is directly related to your circumstances, and it is your perspective about your circumstances that I think in a lot of ways determines your blessing. Now, on the other hand, if you are talking about the fact that it is much easier in life to have a roof over my head and clothes on my back and food in my pantry than it is not to have those kinds of things, and why is it that some people do have those things and there are other people who don't? And is there a correlation between your obedience to God and not? I would say not necessarily, but there are so many biblical principles that talk to us about the stewardship of the things that we have in this life and how to make right choices that honor God. And in our honoring God, when you go into the Proverbs, there are all of these, what are called, they're truisms. They're not promises from God, but there's one very famous one it says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. So it's that seems like a promise from God, but it's not actually a promise. It is a truism. It is to say that if you do the best that you can with your children when they are young and impressionable to put into them the things of God, chances are that they are going to live a life when they get older where they're going to honor God with their lives. They're going to do the things that are required by God, but not always. I can point to many examples in my own life personally of people I know who were raised in Christian homes, who were loved and instructed by the Lord, and when they got older, they departed from it. So there's not really a formula for how to receive God's blessing in this life, how to have all of my material needs met, that sort of thing, and why this guy and not that guy. Ultimately, it says, and we'll get to it in Romans, that God says, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. You look at the story of Jacob and Esau, and he says, Jacob I've loved, Esau I have hated, cursed. I chose one for blessing and not the other one. And I did this before they were born and before they had done anything good or bad. Because of my sovereign choice, I decided I'm going to bless this one and not this one in a particular way. There's, of course, the general blessing of God that falls on every single one of us, the general grace that God gives to every human being. But then there are specific blessings. And listen, a lot of the blessings in my life, I stand back and I ask God all the time, why me? Why have you given me this opportunity or me this blessing? And I don't know. One day we'll find out. The Lord will tell us in heaven one day. Maybe we'll get a better understanding of it. But when you do find yourself being blessed by the Lord, you better honor him with that blessing. You better understand that this is from him and it's not from you. You really didn't do anything to deserve it at all. And you have blessed me in this way, and I'm going to do my best to make sure this goes out to others. Be a conduit for the blessing to flow through. Little Bella.
I have two questions.
Whoa, I see a trend going on here.
Well, they're two completely different questions. But the first one is, so I get the story of Hagar, but one person explained it, I got it, and somebody else did, and now I'm completely confused. Was Sarah mad or jealous? Or like,
Well, I mean, let's just read what it says. I mean, I'm going to give you a preview of what my answer is going to be, which is we don't know. There's legitimately so much, and this was one of the things that I learned in my time of study, that there's just, you can't, we would ask professors like this of our questions like this of our professors all the time, and like, do you think, because you studied the Bible a long time and you're like 75 years old and you've been doing this your whole life, do you think, and then we'd ask a question, and it very often about like the motivation of a person in the Bible, or what was this person thinking, or whatever, and every single time they'd be like, I don't know. Well, you can't know, and it is far better to just say, we don't know, than to try to insert your own interpretation in here. But this is what the story says. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. This is in Genesis 16, if you want to follow along or go back to it later. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Now, this is interesting. You do get a motivation declared there. She says, perhaps I can build a family through her. So her slave is her property. So the assumption here is that you are my slave and my property. So when you have a child, that child is mine too. So you get a little bit of her motive there. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. So you have that there. Doesn't tell you why, but Hagar, it says, is the one who in the relationship started harboring the hatred first. Perhaps she didn't want to be pregnant. Perhaps she was like, I got to carry this ugly old man's son. Like, who knows? But she first began to despise Sarai. So there's contempt going on there between them. And then Sarai said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. What a treat she must have been to live with. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. This is a completely dysfunctional family and relationship that is going on here. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her what you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, probably meaning she beat her or something to that effect. So she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress. And then basically it's going on to parts that don't really help to answer the question. But the angel of the Lord, God, sends her back, says, go back to your mistress and she won't mistreat you. So you can understand, like, you don't have to think hard about the jealousy that would happen there. First of all, in the ancient world, a woman's only function is to make babies. That's what it was. In patriarchies like that, that's your only responsibility. So if you can't do the one thing that you're supposed to do, then you are essentially worthless in a lot of ways. So then when her slave, who she's probably looked down upon to some degree, treated as lesser than, patted her on the head, even if she was kind to her, she was still her slave, bests her in her role as a woman, you can understand where the contempt would come from. And not only that, but I mean, she's having sex with her husband. So there's all kinds of reasons for that. Like, that plan was never going to work. But it's safe to say that they hated each other.
And then my second question was, because I know that, actually, never mind.
Can you just get the mic there?
In the Sunday sermon, you talked about how Abram's faith in God remained true. And I didn't catch this, maybe I missed it, but wouldn't you have called the decision to agree with Sarai and lay with Hagar? Wouldn't that be a moment of unbelief or obviously sin? But
Well, it's actually really interesting because when God spoke to Abraham and gave him that promise in Genesis 15 about his descendants, God never actually says anything about Sarah. He just says, I will make your descendants. Now, you would infer, well, that's going to be me and my wife then, right? Like, that's just the natural order of things. But God never actually mentions Sarah until after Ishmael is born. And it's after Ishmael is born and Abraham is pleading with God and he's like, bless the world through Ishmael then. And God says, no, it's not going to come. The blessing is not coming through Ishmael, but through the son you will have with Sarah. And that's actually after the fact that she's named by name. So there is some wiggle room there, if you will, about Abram's faith in God's promise there, just considering maybe the avenue that he was going to use, but still believing that God was going to do what he said and make a great nation from him, but maybe not knowing how. So that's an explanation as to where Paul gets off, and God, for that matter, who inspired the scriptures, saying that he did not waver in his faith. And then ultimately, the point that we made on Sunday was that we're not judged. God doesn't judge our faith in the midst of our struggles. He judges it by its outcome in the end. So if you prevail till the end, then you're faithful. And you will probably, he will say much better things about your faith than it deserves. And he will say, Dave, you man of great faith. And you say, really, me? I feel like I don't know if you got the right guy. Well done, good and faithful servant, and that whole thing. So,
one more.
okay.
I have the microphone. You said a few weeks ago that the NLT version, you're not as big a fan of as NIV. I get that different versions can appeal to different people. Have you spent any time in the Message translation? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so when it comes to translations of the Bible, you have essentially two ends of the spectrum. Word-for-word translations, and then paraphrases. And then in the middle there is something that you would call thought for thought. The NIV lands pretty squarely in the middle, and it's one of the reasons that I like it. One of the problems that people have with, I think, the disassociation with Scripture is that the Scriptures are intended to be incredibly personal and passionate. They would have read to the original audience as like beautifully eloquent literature and poetry. And when we, like particularly in this day and age, read the King James Version, you're like fumbling over the words as you're reading through it. You don't even know what some of them are. And it's this barrier to the movement that's supposed to be taking place in your heart. That type of movement actually gets captured really well in translations like The Message, where they are putting it into contemporary vernacular, even using contemporary turns of phrase that communicate to a modern audience what they believe the original text would have communicated to the original audience. And that's where there's danger that comes in, because you have to make large assumptions. There's a illustration of this that I use in my hermeneutics class in John chapter 2, when Jesus is at the wedding at Cana and he is about to turn the water to wine, and his mother comes to him, and he's at the wedding, and he's there with he'd been invited by his mom, and his disciples came with him, and then they had run out of wine. And then Mary comes to Jesus, and she, says, they've run out of wine. Jesus turns to Mary, and he says, and this is really interesting if you have your Bibles. It's in John chapter 2. I forget the verse. In John 2, this is just a good for instance that helps to illustrate the point. John 2:4. I was going to say it's somewhere right at the front there. And then who said it? What translation do you have, Kyle? Oh, good man. Good man. He has the NIV. The NIV says, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother came to him and said, they have no more wine. Verse 4, in red letters. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour is not yet come. Does anybody look it up in a different translation?
I got ESV.
What's the ESV say?
Verse 4.
JT, verse 4.
Dear woman, that's not our problem. Right.
Dear woman, that's not our problem. So, woman, why do you involve me? Dear woman, that's not our problem. Who has something else?
The message says, Jesus said, is that any of our business, mother, yours or mine? This isn't my time.
See, and that's actually a really good translation. What
King James, which is almost verbatim.
NKJV says,
Woman, what does your concern have to do with me?
woman, what does your concern have to do with me? It's all over the place. What do you have back there, Dad?
What business do you have with me, woman?
What business do you have with me, woman? So,
New American Standard Version, which is word for word, which is kind of like,
well, see, but that's not even, so this is the difficulty. In the Greek, it is 4 words, what to me and to you, woman, 5 words. That's how it literally reads. So if you were to do an actual word for word translation of that text from Greek to English, it would say, what to you and to me, woman. And then you're like, what is even happening? What am I even reading here? What's happening is Jesus is using a Hebrew colloquialism that is being spoken in Aramaic, which is being translated into Greek, and then is being translated into English. And the question is, when you're a translator, what do we want to translate here? Do we want to translate the words? Because that's going to mean nothing to an English reader. Or do we want to translate the sentiment that is being put across here? And what we find is this Hebrew turn of phrase, you actually can find it in the Old Testament. It's used several times. It is a phrase of disassociation. So it is something that you say to a person who you want to disassociate yourself with. They will come to you with something and you say, it's a colloquialism. So it doesn't make sense except in the context that it's being spoken to the people who understand the language. But if someone came to you and they said, hey, let's go rob that bank. And if you didn't want to go rob the bank with a person, you would say, what to me and to you? And what that means is, how it gets translated, we do not have any business together here. We don't see the situation the same way. Why are you trying to involve me in your schemes, is basically what it is. This actually happens when Jesus shows up, that same Greek in the New Testament, when Jesus shows up to the man who's been possessed by the demons, and the demons say to Jesus, when Jesus shows up, what to me and to you? They say, what business, Jesus, do you have with us? And it's a term of disassociation. And what's happening there is Jesus, his whole life, has been submissive to his mother, and he's come to a point now where his ministry is being inaugurated, and what he's saying to his mom is basically, it could be translated, you don't get to tell me what to do anymore. And that's what he's saying to his mom. And he says woman, which in modern English is disrespectful and insulting, and you would never address your mom as woman. But in the ancient world, it was the equivalent of saying something more like miss. It was a polite but not intimate way that you would refer to a woman, like ma'am or miss or madam or something like that. So it's important that he says that because he's disassociating himself from his mom. You're not mom to me anymore. I'm answering to my Heavenly Father now. And that's what's going on. So when it comes to translations, it's like, what is the best way to translate something like that? If you want to communicate what's actually happening in the story, do you give a 15-minute explanation in parentheses like I just did to say what's going on here? Or do you just try to smooth it out and put it into something that an English reader is going to understand? In a lot of times, the message and things like that do that really well, but then sometimes they take liberties where it's like, for what it's worth, I'm like, I don't know that I would have interpreted that maybe like that or put it like that. So I think somewhere in the middle where you're not doing a word for word or a paraphrase, but more like a thought for thought is where I like to land. It's kind of a neutral ground in the middle of that, which is one of the reasons I prefer the NIV. But the message is, it has a purpose. If you want to feel the emotive sort of power of the Bible, read the Message. If you want to make sure that you're getting like really the words, the ideas a little better, then stay with something a little more rigid. If you want to really know, study the original languages. But who's got time for that? Am I right?
All right,
Yes.
I have a question. It's from Genesis. It's not a super deep question. It's just something that I was discussing today with some people about. Okay, in chapter 2, after God created Adam, and after he names the animals, that's the first time, at least in this translation, that his name is mentioned. Like when it says, it's verse 20, it says, but for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. So that's the first time his name is mentioned. And then in chapter 3, so Eve has been made, and this is now after the fall. This is after God confronts them in the garden. Then it says in chapter 3, verse 20, the man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. And that's the first time we hear her name, and that sounds like that's the first time she was named. And so is that significant, or is that just the translation, the way they decided this is when it's necessary to say it? Like, were they nameless before their names were mentioned? Like, when did were they named before they had a meaning for the name, or was that their name and then the meaning was attributed to it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the name Adam is the Hebrew word Adam, if you want to put some inflection on it, which means man. But it can mean man in the singular. It can also mean mankind. It is used for mankind in other parts in the Old Testament. But what's very interesting about it is that when Adam was created, he was a man. He was the only man, and therefore he represented all of mankind. So in every way that you could read his name, the Word, he was that thing. And he carried on that name. Now, when Eve is created, he calls her woman, which is derivative of man in English, but even the Hebrew, he says, for she was taken from man. So it seems that to some degree, they did not have maybe proper names, or at least Eve, before the fall, because God, and it's the same way God, we say God, and you know you're talking about God, but God isn't God's name, right? It's what he is, but it's not his name. And the Bible actually, Elohim, which is the word for God in Hebrew, which is a plural, which is interesting, is used a number of times in the Old Testament, not referring to Yahweh. So Yahweh is a type, and this is where it gets a little bit dicey. If you are familiar with any of the work of Michael Heiser, he goes into this at great length. But God is a particular type of being who is spiritual in nature, which means that all other beings which are spiritual in nature, while they are not self-existent, are of a like category as God in that they are spirits and not fleshly. So to say that God is God, it is not wrong to say that he is a God. Now, don't hear me wrong. There is no other God equal to God, but when we say God, it means a being that is primarily spiritual. We put a capital G on it so we know which one we're talking about, but we're identifying what he is more than who he is, right? And in the same way, Adam is being identified by what he is, a human being, but because he's the only one at that time, it is what he is and who he is. So you don't really get the distinction there necessarily. I have not actually considered that with the wordplay there, because there's surely wordplay, and you'd have to see if there was like the definite article in front of it, like ha, Adam, or not, that sort of thing in the Hebrew, and I'm not going to try to pull that up right now, but I don't know exactly. But a lot of times, one of the things about Hebrew that's so much different than English and other Western languages in particular is that Eastern languages are very comfortable with and actually love ambiguity. That it's like wordplay. One of the best parts of hip hop music and rap is when they can use a word that has like double meanings, in it at the same time. And it's like, oh, are they talking about this or this, like a double entendre? And you see that in Hebrew repeatedly as you read the Old Testament, where it's like, a great example is in Ezekiel 37 in the Valley of Dry Bones. And God tells the prophet Ezekiel, he says, prophesy to it depends on, the Hebrew word there is ruach. Prophesy to the ruach. But in Hebrew, ruach can mean spirit, or it can mean breath, or it can mean wind. Any of those three words. And he says, and tell the ruach to enter those bones and to give them life. And it's like, is he talking about the wind? Are we commanding the wind to enter the bones? Are we commanding breath to enter the bones? Or are we commanding spirit to enter the bones? And in the West, we're like, which one? We have three different words, spirit, breath, and wind. Which one is it? Let's sort this out. And in Hebrew, they're like, yeah. Yes, indeed. Because for them, spirit and wind are indicative of life and breath and all of those things. So they're all kind of rolled into one. So when it comes to Adam, it's kind of almost like, did he have a name? Was he calling him a man? Was he calling him all mankind? And I'm pretty sure that the ancient Hebrews would have read it and been like, yeah, all of those. He was all of those. So anyway, I don't know if that helps or not. Okay. Yeah, it's really, I love double entendre. Triple entendre is even more fun. If you can do that one. Anybody else? Nephi. Oh boy, Nephi. What are you going to do? Nephi gave me a warning before service.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could articulate like a Christian view of two technologies. One is IVF, so when you take an embryo, make it in a lab, and implant it in another woman who doesn't have to be the mother. And the other technology is, it's being rolled out actually right now, but in certain forms, where you can genetically choose the traits of your children. So like hair color, height, even intelligence. It'll get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you could is there a biblical view of these things? Not a specific one, obviously, but like how would we articulate that?
Yeah, so the first one, IVF, it's a very touchy subject because, as we even heard, in the Bible, there are couples who struggle with infertility, right? Who can't have babies, and IVF, most of the time, in vitro fertilization, when they will take a sperm and an egg from whomever it is, and they bring those two things together to create an embryo, and then they will freeze that embryo most times until they are ready to implant it into a woman where it can then grow into a baby. The difficulty with that is that they don't do just one at a time. They usually do multiples of them because they don't know which ones are going to take. So they will do a bunch. And then what you have is, I believe, not just from a Christian worldview, you can actually throw Christianity and religion out of the conversation altogether. From a scientific standpoint, you have a new life when a sperm fertilizes an egg. Now, there's the whole question about when a soul is created or implanted. The Bible doesn't give us any real clear answer about when God imparts a soul to a person. So there's the question of when the soul arrives. There's this interesting thing that they have observed where when a sperm fertilizes an egg, there's this little flash of light that happens, which is like, that's pretty weird. That might be trying to tell us something, maybe. So it's my personal opinion that when you don't know, err on the side of caution. And if we are creating a bunch of humans and then saving them frozen off to the side until we decide if we want them or not, and then a lot of times, I mean, maybe they do 10 and they're all successful. But we only wanted one baby, so they take all the other ones and they just throw them away. Unless, I mean, I guess they could potentially donate them to someone or something like that. That might make it a little more, it's kind of like adoption to some degree, maybe. There's a lot of muddy water there. And I sympathize, my heart goes out to couples that struggle. I know several of them myself who cannot become pregnant. And that is an avenue for that to happen. It's getting into dicey territory. I'm not entirely sure how the child selection thing that you were talking about works. I know that I have heard of such things where you can pick certain traits or they can identify some, and I think it would be in an IVF setting, something like that. That, I'm just more or less like, I mean, there's all kinds of, scriptures in the Bible where it talks about like people trying to create their path for themselves, like trying to bring about their own will, not trusting God for those sorts of things. and it just never goes well. So like, I feel like I would much rather leave whatever my kids are going to be. I was just with my boys. Angela was at worship practice here before I came, and I was at home, and I was looking at Deacon in particular today. And I was just thinking, like, what a perfect little man you have given me, God. And just so thankful. And I mean, I think a Christian perspective on choosing your baby, I think it is incumbent upon us to trust the Lord in that process and to let him give us the child that he has chosen for us, rather than trying to take matters in our own hands. That kind of separate from the IVF issue, but the IVF thing, it poses a lot of real significant moral considerations. But again, I can sympathize with those couples. I mean, if you were forcing me into a corner to give an answer to the question, I would probably say, like, we probably shouldn't be doing that. Or maybe try one at a time, maybe, if we're going to. But the way that they do it right now, there's just a lot of, like, big questions. So we'll wait for the hate mail on that one. Thanks. Our church is going to get canceled. Good.
So you know those scriptures that are in the Bible, you're like, wait, I never read this. No one ever taught me this. It's like, has anyone focused on these?
Yeah.
One good question I have is
boy.
on 1 Samuel 28, where Saul is conjuring up the prophet Samuel's spirit.
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on him conjuring up someone who's passed away's spirit? Do you believe it was actually his spirit? What do you think it was? And could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. This is a fun one. Can you read it? Can you just read it to us real quick?
How much do you want me to read?
Just the good part, where he goes to the witch at
Okay.
Endor, and
Okay.
then up to the point where Samuel
Do you
speaks.
need context at all?
Nah, just no.
Okay.
Saul wants to inquire of the Lord.
Okay,
The
yeah.
prophet's dead. He wants to
Right.
hear from him, so he goes to a witch and
Right.
says, "Call up the prophet." And
All right.
There's your context.
1 Samuel 28, verse 3. I'm reading NLT. I know.
we'll accept it. We'll accept it.
I know. You want the NASBA? All right. Meanwhile, Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him. He was buried in Ramah, his hometown, and Saul had banned from the land of Israel all mediums and those who consult the spirits of the dead. The Philistines set up their camp at Shunem.
Just roll with it.
Right. And Saul gathered all the army of Israel and camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the vast Philistine army, he became frantic with the fear. He asked the Lord what he should do, but the Lord refused to answer him, either by dream or by sacred lots. There's another good question. By sacred lots or by the prophets. Saul then said to his advisors, "Find a woman who is a medium so I can go ask her what to do." His advisors replied, "There is a medium at Endor." So Saul disguised himself by wearing ordinary clothing instead of his royal robes. Then he went to the woman's home at night, accompanied by 2 of his men. "I have to talk to a man who has died," he said. "Will you call up his spirit for me?" "Are you trying to get me killed?" the woman demanded. "You know that Saul has outlawed all the mediums and all who consult the spirits of the dead. Why are you setting a trap for me?" But Saul took an oath in the name of the Lord and promised, "As surely as the Lord lives, nothing bad will happen to you for doing this." Finally, the woman said, whose spirit do you want me to call up?" "Call up Samuel," Saul replied. Then the woman saw Samuel. She screamed, "You've deceived me. You are Saul." "Don't be afraid," the king told her. "What do you see?" "I see a God coming up out of the earth," she said. "What does he look like?" Saul asked. "He is an old man wrapped in a robe," she replied. Saul realized it was Samuel, and he fell to the ground before him. "Why have you disturbed me by calling me back?" Samuel asked Saul. "Because I am in deep trouble," Saul replied. "The Philistines are at war with me, and God has left me and won't reply by prophets or dreams. So I have called for you to tell me what to do." But Samuel replied, "Why ask me, since the Lord has left you and has become your enemy? The Lord has done just as he said he would. He has torn the kingdom from you and given it to your rival, David. The Lord has done this to you today because you refuse to carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites. What's more, the Lord will hand you and the army of Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons will be here with me. The Lord will bring down the entire army of Israel in defeat. Do you want me to read his response of that?
No, that's good. Great job reading, by the way. That's not always an easy task. So the reason I asked you to read it is because it reads like this is exactly what happened. That's how it reads. There's like no real ambiguity there. And even the response of the medium, medium is, of course, a go-between between two parties, is like she's shocked at what's taking place, right? She's having this moment of like terror because this is really happening. Now, there's question about mediums in general, like this story aside. Is this legit? It is. There's a couple reasons in the Bible to believe that dead people cannot interact with the living anymore. The parable of Lazarus and the rich man is one such example. It is a parable, but Jesus always used parables from real life settings, or at least people's understanding of things. So when he's talking in that parable about Lazarus and the rich man, and they die, and one of them's in Gehenna and the other one's in Abraham's bosom, and they say, he says, the rich man, let me go back, or you go back and tell them, and the answer is no, and even if we did, no one would believe them. So there is this scene that is set up where it's like there's an impossibility of crossing chasms and sides and going from this realm to the next. However, those limitations aren't put on demons. And very often, it's my personal belief that when mediums are conjuring spirits of loved ones, that what they have are false spirits who are showing up in these moments, who maybe have been roaming around the earth for millennia, gathering data and information, and maybe even about your own family, and some demon shows up and is talking to this person who is, for all intents and purposes, a witch. I lived in New Orleans for a couple of years, and I visited some of the voodoo shops and stuff just as homework. I was not buying anything. But I can tell you this, I was really prayed up one day, and I was feeling really feisty and was just like full of the Spirit, and I was walking downtown, and there was this particular shop, and I was like, I wonder what's going on in there. And I had never been in one before, and I prayed, and I was like, Lord, I said, just cover me. I'm going in there, and I was just going to do some spiritual warfare. I was going to go in there, and I was going to pray. And I kid you not, the door's here, and the checkout counter's on the back wall, right back there, and there is a woman behind the counter who's very obviously involved in all of the stuff that she's selling in the store. And as soon as I stepped across the threshold of that store, she goes and looked straight at me. And that might have just been her gimmick there at the store, that she does that to everybody who walks in. It didn't feel like that, though. She looked like very sternly at me as I was walking in, and I was like, hi. And I just walked around and checked out some of the stuff. And what's really interesting is they have some of the Catholic imagery of Jesus in there, which really makes you wonder about some of those. It's not by coincidence that Jesus is always suffering in their pictures. They are obsessed with the crucified Jesus, him in his state of torment. And it is almost as if it is a They're kind of hanging on to that image of Jesus in misery. And you see those sorts of things in there, and it's like, well, that's kind of interesting. But I'm saying all of that to say that I've been like around those sorts of things. And even in Jackson Square area, at night, every night, when the lights go down, all the tarot card readers come out, all the psychics come out. And the first time I went to New Orleans, when I was going to visit the school there, I went to seminary there, if I left that part out. So I lived there for several years. You walk into Jackson Square where all of these people are, and you could just feel, like I felt something like crawling up my spine as I was walking around there. So the spiritual realm is very, very real. And probably if we went around the room here, everybody would have some experience that you've had with something sinister that you have perceived before. So it's real. Now, I do not believe that when you're going to these psychics and tarot card readers that they're talking to your dead grandmother. I think they're talking to demons. It raises the very interesting question about the story, coming back to, that you asked. Is this a demon impersonating Samuel, or did Samuel actually show up? The woman's response almost makes it out like what she's seeing here is not what I'm used to seeing. This spirit is not manifesting in the way that spirits usually do, and there's something about this that is quite terrifying, which makes you think maybe this is actually someone coming from the throne room of God now instead of the pit of hell. Perhaps it is that God, in what you would call an act of mercy and grace to Saul, said, okay, you want to know, you want to hear it, here it is. And he sends the prophet down there to go manifest himself, perhaps in a way similar to the transfiguration when Moses and Elijah show up with Jesus, maybe something like that. Who knows? We see these kinds of things. God gives the permissions for those sorts of things. So I have come to believe about that it was God stepping into the middle of something that is usually evil and demonic and using it to communicate a message to Saul in the middle of that. I read it as it happened, as it says that it happened. The questions about permissions and things in the spiritual realm are, I mean, ultimately, you have to say everything is, like, even when you go to the story of Job and the devil wants to go torment Job, he has to ask God for permission first. And God sets the boundaries. You can do this, but not this, and this, but not this. So God ultimately gives permissions to all of the spirits to do whatever. But I take it as that actually happened, and it was Samuel. Thank you.
Hello. Okay.
Courtney.
Hi. I think this is an easy one. I just don't remember exactly what it means, and I always get confused. So when it says things like there were 6 abominations and then 7, or 3 whatever and then 4, it's like there always ends up being 7, or there always ends up being 4, and I can't think of like specific examples, but I see it so often. It's like 3 this and even 4, and I'm just like, okay, is it 3 or 4? Like, what does that mean? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, that is like a literary device that is used in Hebrew to make a point. And it is basically, the idea is, it's almost like the infomercial thing, but wait, there's more, like that kind of thing. Like, you think that this is enough already, and it should be, but there's more. So it's a way of like emphasizing whatever idea it is that they're trying to put across. Like, so the answer is there's 7. If it says there's 6, but then there's one more, then there's 7. They're just trying to make a point that it's like in excess, basically, whatever it is that they're talking about. So it's a literary device for exaggeration, basically. Or maybe not exaggeration, but emphasis. Okay, we are past our time just a little bit, unless there's another. Allison, make it a good one. We'll make this the last one. Don't let us down.
Going back to spiritual warfare, in Ephesians 6, when it talks about, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and so forth.
Uh-huh.
I wonder about this a lot. How far does that go? Is that talking about all of our struggles, or which struggles?
Yeah. I think that, so he's speaking there, that particular passage, he's speaking about the struggle basically of the Christian life. And it really comes down to the idea of, we've talked about this a couple times, that in both Hebrew in the Old Testament and in Greek in the New Testament, the word for temptation and trial is the same word. It gets translated either a test or a temptation, depending on the person who is behind it. So it really would be better, kind of like in English, for us to think of the word as an obstacle or a challenge, right? We'll call it a challenge. So that word would be challenge. And then it's like, when you face a challenge, God has a perspective about this challenge where he's looking at it as a test. This is an opportunity for you to trust me, for you to obey me, for you to do the things that I have called you to do, and to overcome this challenge and to come out victorious. The enemy is looking at that challenge and wanting you to fail. They want you to trust in yourself. They want you to curse God. They want you to turn away from the calling that you have on your life. Any of those things, and that is a temptation. And that's why it's the same word. And if God is the one who is being seen as the one who's put that thing there in front of you, then it is a test. And if it is the devil, then it is a temptation. But either way, the challenge is overcome in the spiritual and not the material. So to some extent, any struggle, any challenge that you have in your life is of spiritual consequence. Our human existence is just an extension of our spiritual life, right? Like we're making all of our decision, our mind, will, emotions, all of those things are immaterial, and they express themselves materially. So I think it could really encapsulate everything. Anything that you have a struggle with, that's a challenge, that's a difficulty. It's, am I going to lean into God for strength in this thing, or am I going to try to do it on my own? And when we try to do it on our own, that's the enemy winning. But ultimately, I mean, every time I read that, I'm thinking mostly of interpersonal relationships. That it is like when we are struggling with other people, like we're not struggling with people. We're struggling with attitudes of the heart. We're struggling with convictions in mind. We're struggling with pride and humility, that when stuff flares up in our lives, it's because of sin. And we have to choose whether or not we're going to honor God in those things. So I would say that you could apply it to any struggle. Any struggle or challenge that is put in front of you, the enemy wants you to fail. They want you to do something stupid that's not going to honor God. And God is saying, trust me, listen to me, follow me. So I would say everything.
Thank you.
Praise God. Okay, with that, we'll close, and I guess, I don't know, we'll do it again next week. How's that sound? Come back next week at 6:30. We'll do it again if you didn't get your question in this week. But let's pray before we go. God, thank you for this time together, God. Thank you for a place like this to meet in, God, and thank you for people like this to fill this place. God, we thank you for your gracious spirit that guides and governs our lives, God, and we pray that we trust in you and we seek you in all things. and at all times, God, and that you make much of the humble offering of each one of our lives. God, go with each one from here, before them and behind them, God. Make the ground level in front of their feet, God, and lift our faces up to yours each moment of each day. We love you. We ask all these things in the name of Jesus. And all God's children said, Amen.